Hello and welcome to another Blender tutorial. And in this one, we're going to be making this cool looking procedural vase with decorative dried flowers. With geometry nodes, of course. So let's start. So I'm in a new Blender 3.2 project. After reorganizing collections in the outliner, I'll create a new geometry node setup with the default cube selected. Let's begin with the vase. I will disconnect the base geometry and add a curved line. With direction option selected and with a reasonable length, 0.4 meters. I want to add length to the group input to be able to access it from the modifiers properties. To build the vase geometry, I will convert this curved line to a mesh with the corresponding node. As a profile curve, I will use curve circle with radius set to 0.1. I will keep the resolution as is for now and fill the caps to get perfect cylinder mesh. It is time to give it a vase shape. I will create more points on the curve with a resample curve node to get enough vertices to work with. 30 points should do the job. Now, to deform the cylinder, I will add set curve radius node before converting to mesh, which gives me additional control over radius. But I want to apply different radius to each point on the curve. I will use spline parameter input node and plug the vector into the radius of the set curve radius node. The width is set based on the vector of the curve, from 0 to 1 in scale. Vases don't look like this, so I will use float curve node after a spline parameter to adjust the shape of this cylinder. I will add 4 points to this float curve and play around with their values until I'm satisfied with the shape. Vector slider here allows to control influence of the float curve, but that's not exactly what I want. I would like to have something like morphing effect between different possible shapes. So I will add another float curve with same vector plugged into the value. I think this shape is quite common in the vase world. To make both of these curves blend, I will use Mix RGB node, since floats can be mixed in the same ways as textures. Now I can adjust the mix of both of these float curves with vector right here. So I will add it to the group input. Great, but I want to add even more variability. I'm going to add map range node after the spline parameter to control the scale range of the radius, minimum and maximum values. I will add maximum value from this map range node to the group input as it looks like the one I want to use in modifiers properties. Now, with both of these values, I can create lots of different shapes of vases. Vase is usually empty inside, so I need to remove this face on top. To do this, I will use Delete Geometry node. Once added, everything vanished. But I can delete only specific places of geometry with Selection Socket. To delete that top face, I will select Face in the drop-down and try to identify that face by index. So I will add Index node along with the Compare node with integer selected in the drop-down, and plug it into the selection of Delete Geometry. After scrolling through all the numbers, I found that index I need. But what if I change the resolution of the mesh? The selection I've made will become invalid. To fix this, I will use Domain Size node. Plug the mesh into the geometry and use Face Count output in my Compare node. I need to subdivide 1 from this number since index count starts from 0. And it works with any resolution I put here. Since I fixed that, I feel that changing the number of angles will be a good feature. So I'll add resolution and radius into the group input. To get smooth beveled edges on the corners, I will add Fillet curve node for this curved circle. I'll set it to poly and enable limit radius option. Increase count to 5 and set radius, which is kind of a size of the bevel, to 0.01. Now, no matter how many angles I have, they all going to be beveled. So I want to make it optional. I'll add switch node here and block curve circle into the false socket, and the one with the fillet curve into true. The switch boolean will go to group input. Now I can control this option in the modifier's properties and test how it all works together. Let's add some thickness to this mesh. Since there is no solidify node, at least for now, I will use extrude mesh. Uncheck individual and decrease offset scale to something around -0.01. Now I have inner part of the vase. To combine it with the outer part, I'll use join geometry to join both of these together, mesh with and without extrude nodes. Now, since I'm joining 2 meshes, their vertices won't be connected. It can be seen when geometry node modifier is applied. I'll undo all the changes here and add merge by distance node to merge all the vertices that have maximum distance of 0.001 meters between each other. And now, when modifier is applied, all vertices are connected. The other thing I want to do is to add set shade smooth node, just in case, even though smooth shading is applied here by default. Since the mesh for the vase is ready, I want to spend some time to organize all the nodes and values. I will rename all the inputs to the proper names and add some frames to some sets of nodes to better navigate and find any issues if there are going to be any. Alright, let's work on the material for the vase. But before I switch to shader editor, I need to apply material here in geometry node with set material node. Otherwise, material won't be applied to the mesh. So I'll add set material node and select default material. I will also rename it to vase. To be able to change this material in the modifier's properties, I will add material into group input. Now I'll go to shader editor. And I have vase material already open here. I will start from gradient texture. With Ctrl-Shift right-click, I can quickly preview this node on the mesh. And with node selected, Ctrl-T will bring texture coordinate and mapping nodes. I will add color ramp after the gradient texture and move black and white sliders close to each other to get that constant change between the colors. I will also rotate the texture 90 degrees on y-axis. It is also possible to use constant option in the color ramp if the gradient falloff is not needed here. Now I want to combine this with a magic texture. To combine both of the textures, I'll add Mix RGB node and plug both textures into color 1 and color 2. Vector slider is going to give me the desired mix of these textures. Now I'll play with different settings and color ramp to find the combination I want. It is time to add some colors. I'll plug the color ramp into the base color and put Mix RGB in between color ramp and principled BSDF. Color ramp should be connected as vector so I can use it as a mask. Now I want to see how it will look like with different mesh variations. I can use various procedural textures in combination with gradient. Textures like Musgrave, Vase, Voronoi, or any other. Even though texture looks pretty interesting, it still looks a bit dull. So I will add another gradient texture with a different color ramp to cover the top of the vase. And mix it with the rest of the textures with another Mix RGB node. This time with multiply operation selected. Other operations may also give different interesting results. Now we'll use this mask for the normals with bump node. The mask here should go to height, since black and white texture should be used for reading the height information. And it will look a lot better with the proper lighting. So I will go to settings and change render engine to cycles. And in the world settings, I'll add HDRI as an environment texture. I've got this one from Polyheaven. To remove this background and get only the light, I'll enable transparent option in film settings. Now I can see that I can decrease strength of the normal in here. I will add a noise texture with separate texture coordinate and mapping nodes. And rescale and rotate the texture to get something like stripes around the mesh. I will use it as height into another bump node. At the same time, I'll run it through the color ramp and plug it into the roughness of principled BSDF and adjust the levels until happy. Any other adjustments can be made or new materials created based on this one for more variations. Okay, finished with the vase, let's switch to dried flowers. I'll add joint geometry node right before set shade smooth and disconnect the vase for now to better see the flowers I'm building. As always, I will start with curved line. I'll set the length a bit higher than the vase. 0.7 looks good for the start. First of all, I want to make flower band and control this with a variable. So I will resample the curve to 30 points and add set position node after that. I want to rotate each point of the curve with progression. So I'll add vector rotate node. I want to rotate every point only in y-axis and plug it into the position socket. Curve disappeared because it has a missing position vector, so we'll add position input node here. Now to calculate the rotation for every point, I will add spline parameter and two math nodes. The first one to multiply a factor of the curve by a value, which is going to be the number of degrees, and another one to convert this value to radians. And plug all of that into the angle of vector rotate node. Now with this value I can control the bending of the flower stem. Additionally, I want to control where that bending starts, since I have lots of different possible vase shapes. So I will add compare node, plug factor in slot A, and plug the result into the selection. Now, by increasing value in slot B, I will remove bending from the bottom of the flower stem. But the bending degree is still calculated without taking the bending start point into account. The fix is simple, just subtract bending start value from the factor before multiplying by degree. I will use value input node for that, or maybe even add that value to group input. Now I want to create lots of flowers, like a bouquet. For this I need to create points to instance the flowers. I will use spiral curve. I will set height to 0 and set start and end radius to 0 and 0.01. Other values can be used here depending on the situation. Now I'll add instance on points node and use spiral as points. Pre-made flower stem will go to the instance socket. Now all of the stems look in the same direction. So I will add a rotation randomization on Z-axis. With Combine XYZ, I can access each axis separately. I will add Random Value node and Math node to convert value to radians. I will set random range from 0 to 359 degrees and plug that into the Math node, and the whole thing into the Z socket. Now I can adjust spiral dimensions to change instance's position a bit. I want also to give a bit randomization to Y rotation. From -5 to 5 degrees may work. Randomizing the scale will be a similar process. I will add Combine XYZ with scale set to 1 on all axes. And I want to randomize scale on Z axis only, from around 0.9 to 1.1. Now I will connect the vase back to see how it all looks together. I can see that some minor changes are required, but all of that can be configured from modifier's properties. As always, I will organize all the nodes and add required values to group input. Okay, so let's convert these stems to meshes. Add curve to mesh node with curve circle as profile curve. I'll drop the resolution of the circle to 6 vertices and radius to 0.003. I also want stems to be thinner at the top, so I will use spline parameter with map range node to achieve this. To add a flower bud, I will use instance on points node again. And before converting them to mesh, I will add all of my instance stem curves to the point socket. Join geometry again to make instances appear. And for the instance right here, I will use icosphere. With a tiny radius, something around 0.015 meters, and a few subdivisions. Now I want this flower bud to appear only on the last point of each curve, so I will add index input node and compare it against integer value for the selection. This integer value is going to be the number of vertices in a curve -1. I will change the z-scale of the icosphere instances. To make flower buds look in the same direction as the curve, I'll add curve tangent input node plug it into the Align Euler to Vector node, and it is very important to plug it into the vector socket. Put that result into the rotation socket of the instance on points. Also, change the orientation to Z. Now I want to add some tiny little hair particles to the flower buds. I'll add Instance on Points node once more, and use my instanced icospheres as points this time. Don't forget to join this with the rest of the geometry. I will add a tiny little curve line as the instance. To make these tiny curves look outside, I'll add normal input and run it through Align Euler to Vector, which will go into the rotation. Now I can change the resolution of the icospheres or add a Subdivide Mesh node before the instance on points to increase number of these particles. To add some variations to these particles, I want to displace them with Noise Texture. So I'll add Set Position node and plug Noise Texture into the offset. Map Range node will help me to balance the noise texture range and strength at the same time. And I want to make this displacement only on Y-axis, so I'll add Combine XYZ node for that. And don't forget to resample the curve. This is a tiny little detail which will be barely noticeable, so it is up to you. Now, the same process as for the stems. I will add some geometry to these hair particles with Curve to Mesh node and a curve circle with a minimum resolution. The same thing goes for the set curve radius. To finalize this project, I will add Set Material node for the flowers. But before that, I will reorganize some of these connections. I'll create a new material and select it in the Set Material node. In the shader editor, I will start the material from Ambient Occlusion node. Adjust the levels with Color Ramp, which will go into the Mix RGB node factor. where I will also pick 2 colors for my flowers. I'm thinking about desaturated orange or brown colors, which gives me that dried effect I want. And that's about it. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know in the comments what you think. You can download this project for free on itch.io. The link is in the description below. Thank you very much for watching and have a great time of the day. Bye bye.